What is the most scariest but still unexplained thing that you have experienced?
Seeing three big, bright circular lights above me randomly turn off while driving on a busy highway in NJ 287. I've driven a lot and seen a lot of planes at night go through clouds. That was the only experience I've had where I felt and still feel unsettled because the way they randomly turned off wasn't explained by cloud coverage or any other physical obstruction. To this day, I can't explain it without going down a major rabbit hole.
Okay, so me and my family all saw a group of lights in the clouds, kind of like big after a storm type clouds in front of us and clear skies behind us. The lights were spaced like they were on a huge circular object, but there was no object, just lights. It was dim at first, then got brighter and brighter. Then they would all spin. Go back to dim, then get brighter and brighter, spin. The dim to bright took a couple of minutes. Dim to bright, spin, repeat. Never seen or heard of anything like this before. There was a drag line, big shovel type thing that removes a shit ton of dirt for coal fire plants nearby, so maybe it was reflecting off of that, but I don't know how a reflection would do that.
Could be a plane raising landing gear, the lights on them turn off when raised.
The plane itself wouldn't go completely dark, though. There's always some type of light on, blinking or static or both. This went from being prominent in the dark sky to completely dark in an instant. I've thought it through, and it always leads me to places I don't want to go, lol. I appreciate your response, though.
I lived in a small one-bedroom under-house flat, and as my cat walked past the bedroom door, she looked at the wall above my head, froze, fluffed up, and hissed. She started moving to the side really slowly, still fluffed up and staring that spot above my head. I looked up, but there was nothing. When she got near the side of the door frame, she bolted. I got up to see if she was okay, and as I walked past the TV, it went off channel to static. My cat wanted out badly, and I went out with her. The TV went back to normal, and chastising myself, I opened the door to go back in, and as I took one step in the TV, went back to static. I stayed outside with my cat until she calmed down, and nothing like that ever happened again. I still think about it sometimes.
I feel like your cat was possibly reacting to an electrical field that we don't really notice, like a static buildup which also affected your TV. IDK spitballing.
I can't remember now, but I wonder if maybe there was a storm brewing and it was an electromagnetic static thing going on.
I was house-sitting the past 2 weeks at my grandparents' house, which is pretty big, so it gets a little scary being there alone. I was on my phone with the TV on, and the door to the door I was in was closed. My cat was kind of pawing at the door, which isn't super strange, but then he meowed loudly and ran over to me. It caught my attention, but he's a chatty cat, so I wasn't really concerned until a few minutes later when there was a loud bang from behind the door. My cat looked at me with what I can only describe as a concerned, scared face and ran and hid behind the couch. I rationalized it as one of the dogs trying to get my attention to go outside, so I went downstairs, using a door on the opposite side of the room, lol, expecting to hear the dogs coming downstairs to go out. They were both sound asleep in a completely different area of the house. I didn't go back into the room. The noise came from, until my last day, house-sitting, and there was nothing amiss. Still really bothering me, not knowing what it could have been.
This sounds like something that happened to me. My cat didn't like a specific corner in my room in one of the places I lived a few years ago. He would stare at it. It was just a weird cat thing until I told one of my roommates about it. This roommate had a dog and shared a wall with me. He told me his dog would bark at the same corner at night.
Okay, now that is weird. I wonder if maybe an animal lived in the wall?
It was always the same spot, though, never moved, and never heard any noises myself, and it was right above the head of my bed.
It's not quite unexplained. I slept with a radio on low as a kid because I was afraid of train whistles in the nearby rail yard. As I aged, it turned into reading books with the light and radio on until I fell asleep. I am autistic and have a messed up sleep schedule. My parents were fine as long as I did something quiet if I couldn't sleep. One day, I spilled water on the radio. The radio broke in an odd way. It got all kinds of odd traffic, including radio stations that were definitely not from my home country. I was too young to quite understand it all. Then, a very strange sound started. It was a slow sound like someone grooving on a keyboard, but the notes were very random. It was super loud, and the longer it went on, the more I realized it wasn't a song. It wasn't a song, and it wasn't anything I was supposed to hear. It sounded very forbidden, and being a child with too much of an imagination, I wondered if it was aliens. I got my mum to wake up and look at it. She was baffled and said I should either try to tune to a different station or turn the radio off. I did, and I got a lot of strange interference the next night, and so on, but not that specific sound. I got a new radio for Christmas that year. The incident stayed in my mind. In 2012-ish, I read a cracked article about unexplained sounds. I read something that seemed similar to what I heard. It wasn't aliens. It was a Russian number station for communicating with spies. Specifically, a type called a slow polytone. Each note I heard was part of a coded message. Now, I listen for these regularly as a major hobby and have a lot of journals and knowledge gathered on it over the years.
How does one get into a hobby like that? It sounds super interesting.
Just start pouring water into radios and see where it gets you.
That's how Sony started.
I've told other unexplained stories on Reddit, but I'm not sure I've told the one about the thing my friend and I saw on the side of the road. I'll try and remember it to the best of my ability. It was about 12-ish years ago. If anyone else saw something similar, let me know. It's around 3 a.m. in rural north-central Alberta. My friend and I are driving home from a high school party in which neither of us drank or took any drugs. It's the middle of winter. In Alberta, this means it's cold outside. This night, it was below -30 degrees Celsius, below -22 degrees Fahrenheit, edited to fixed temperature. The whole way home, my friend and I are chatting about the usual things. What happened at the party, the boys we liked, etc. While most teenage girls are chatty, this friend in particular was a chatterbox. Mostly I would listen and just react to whatever she said. Love friends like that. So, because she would do most of the talking and didn't require much input, I'd zone out sometimes, looking out the window. We were about 5 to 7 minutes outside of town at this point, taking the highway, probably going 75 to 90 kilometers per hour, using an online calculator that puts us around 6 to 7-ish kilometers outside of town in a sparsely wooded area with no services open in town. As we round a corner, I'm zoning out, listening to my friend talk, when through the windshield, I notice glowing eyes off the side of the road, the headlights not fully hitting whatever it was. The eyes were green, yellowish. This would be normal, but these eyes are about 7 to 8 feet above the ground. At first, I think it's a hiker or someone walking back to town, but their eyes wouldn't glow, and no one is going to be walking that far from town or any houses when it's that cold and late outside. This was a town of less than 1,000 ppl. As we drive closer, this thing appears to have goat-like legs, is very heavy set, and stands on 2 feet. Its arms drop down by its side like a person's, and it appears to even have some kind of dark clothing on the top half. It had something like goat-like horns that curved but went upwards. At this point, my blood runs completely cold, and I have a full-fledged instinctual freeze response. Hairs standing up on the back of my neck. I remember hearing my own disembodied voice think, I shouldn't be seeing this. This is wrong. I even teared up. We passed by it relatively quickly, and I can't stop thinking about what that was. My perception of time was kind of weird after that due to panic. But now the lights of town are in front of us, and I realize my friend isn't talking anymore. I turned to my friend and sheepishly said with tears still in my eyes, "Sorry, what were you saying? I must be going crazy, but I thought I saw something back there." She said, No, it's fine. I saw it too. Did it kind of look like a goat? So she saw it too. We had no idea what it was. We both come from hunting families, and I know the easiest critique is that it was an elk or moose standing on hind legs. But the arms of an elk or deer don't just fall beside the body, they buckle outwards a bit. Regardless, it seemed human-like in its stance, and it was very heavy set. Then, you'd think, oh, it was a bear. But it had horns and curved back legs. I assume moose would be the same as an elk or deer, but I've never really seen a moose standing ambiently, typically just when they fight. Even our responses were odd. You'd think, given scary movies, you'd immediately flip out and react. Both of us kind of just got entranced and terrified for a while, blood running cold. While the friend and I don't talk anymore, we talked about it a few times in the next years, we were still in contact. She continued to refer to it as the goat thing.
This sounds absolutely terrifying. I'm also Canadian, from BC, and I'm aware of what the Navajo refer to as skinwalkers. I imagine the First Nations in Alberta. I'm fairly positive the largest Indigenous group would be Cree in the prairies, have something very similar.
Am BC born and resident again now, and the woods are spooky out here too. Truly, it was terrifying, and in a weird way. I've come face to face with bears and been stalked by cougars, had scary encounters with real people, and my fear was not the same. Each time it was more of a head rush and thinking about how you should play the situation to survive. This time was a weird, frozen, sick feeling that is telling you that this is something entirely wrong and outside of any cognitive models that could guide you through the situation. I've wondered about how Indigenous knowledge might relate to what I saw, but I generally do not speak to people about this because I seem insane or like I'm lying.
I'm Salto from SK and always heard stories about Nanabozo, or Wasakchuk if Cree, growing up. My elders would say things like, "Don't go too far in the bush, Nanabozo will get you," or "Don't whistle at night." Obviously that would scare us into listening lol, but I wouldn't necessarily say it's evil/bad. But if I saw what you saw, I'd immediately believe that's what it was.
I'm Bangladeshi, and my mom always told us to never whistle at night. I feel like there's so much overlap in different cultures. Edit. Mom also told us not to stare at our shadows either.
Aussie here. I've been told by Indigenous Australians that they also believe whistling at night attracts bad spirits. I'm the whitest girl ever, but now I avoid whistling at night. So many unrelated cultures from distant corners of the globe having the same rule makes me wary of violating it. Just in case.
I'm in Oz too. I whistle my dogs inside every night before bed. I might have to change that habit.
I think Hawaiians also have a similar lore about whistling at night.
I moved to a different city for university at the peak of the pandemic. I lived off campus in a suite with a couple of my friends from my hometown. Life happened, and they both ended up moving out by the end of the first semester. So I was now living alone in a very quiet neighborhood. I got off of work late one night and crawled into bed around 12 a.m. I woke up about an hour later to the sound of footsteps shuffling around in my bedroom. I opened my eyes to see a very tall man in my doorway, backlit by the streetlights, with his cell phone upright in his hand as if he was recording. When the person registered, I was awake. They backed their way out of the room and started running. I followed them outside and watched them hop into the driver's seat of an empty car that had been left running before speeding down the street. I had no information to give to the police when they arrived. To this day, I have no idea who that person could have been or what they were doing in my bedroom at 1 a.m.
Okay, so this one still gives me chills just thinking about it. I will say that, to a point, I believe in paranormal stuff. I have had too many creepy and unexplained things that I can confirm with others happen. However, I try to be very skeptical and always try to find the most reasonable explanations. This happened about 25 years ago. I was 7 or 8 years old. I was laying in the top bunk of the bunk bed I shared with my twin brother. We had an attached bathroom, and the only light coming in the room was the light emanating from under the bathroom door. I was laying in bed, listening to my brother cry as my dad tried to remove a splinter from my brother's finger. I looked at the foot of my bed, and I saw a man about 5'10" tall, long hair about shoulder length, short beard, and what looked like a flannel shirt and possibly overalls or suspenders standing there. And his pupils were glowing, kind of green like if you see an animal's eyes in the dark. I started screaming, "Daddy, Daddy, there is a man in here," standing at the foot of my bed. I looked back and he was gone, and I just kept screaming. I was terrified. This apartment had a front and back door, but they were absolutely locked, as we lived in a bad neighborhood in a very old part of the city. 10 years later, I recounted the story to my dad, and he had honestly forgotten about it. He did say, and he did not tell me when I was younger, that he did from time to time swear he saw a man who matched that description, minus the glowing eyes, in the apartment late at night. My dad had searched the apartment a few times after seeing him, but there was no trace of a way he came in, and often he would follow the man to a closet, and he just sort of disappeared.
One of the creepiest things I ever experienced was late at night when I heard faint whispers coming from an empty room. It felt like someone was standing right behind me, breathing down my neck. I turned around, and there was absolutely no one there. The air felt heavy, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. To this day, I have no idea what it was, and it still gives me chills just thinking about it.
This is something that happened to me quite recently, and it creeped me out so much. I live alone in my apartment, and I'm a horror gaming fan, and thus I was scouring Steam looking for a cool horror game. I put on my headphones and I watched multiple trailers and eventually came to a game called Horror in the Hood. Looked at the page and watched the trailer. Here is where the creepy part begins. Near the end of the trailer, there's a very creepy voice saying something like, "Can you help me, please?" 1 second, literally 1 second after I watched it, I could clearly hear, from outside my headphones so it was muffled, an old male voice saying, "I can help, haha," from my hallway behind me. Especially the laugh was creepy. Needless to say, I threw off my headphone and immediately looked behind me, only to be greeted by the dark hallway. I stared into it, slowly grabbing my ruler that was on my desk. After moments that felt like an eternity, I was able to stand up, slowly move towards the hallway while grabbing a tiny flashlight I have on my nightstand. I flashed the hallway from a distance, but there was nothing. To give light to the hallway, I have to go into it and turn the switch there, which was very creepy to do. Of course, there was nothing there at all, but it creeps me out still. I left the light on everywhere that night and still keep on the light in the hallway when I am on my computer now. 2 days after this happened, I went back to watch the Horror in the Hood trailer to make sure that the "I can help haha" was not in the trailer. And I just made a mistake. It's not in the trailer. It gives me the creeps just typing this. Oh, wow. That's scary. Something similar happened to me that I can't explain. It was around 1 a.m. and I was still up watching TV. I couldn't sleep. I got really into watching some sort of history documentary about the Shroud of Turin. When they zoomed up closely to the shroud, my TV started to glitch and the picture was stuck on the shroud. The audio froze, and then I heard a man's voice saying, "Don't look," in a really unnatural, deep voice. It felt like it was right behind me. I whipped my head around, and there was nobody there. I live alone since my wife passed. My daughter and grandchild comes over on occasion, but this night I was alone. I live in rural Ireland, and whilst not my first rodeo with ghosts, etc., this experience felt unnatural. I don't know why. The TV went back to normal a couple of seconds after I heard, "Don't look." I managed to hunt down the documentary and combed it for these words. Still don't know where it came from. For some reason, it really frightened me. I went to bed a little shaken up, if I'm honest. If I see anything about the Shroud of Turin advertised or in news articles, I get a shiver. The voice sounded extremely deep. I've never heard a voice like it. Big baritone voice. I don't know. I'm getting the shivers typing this, and I've seen some stuff in my lifetime on this earth. I've been here on this earth 7 decades. I know it doesn't sound scary, but it was the deepness of the voice that I didn't like, especially the TV sticking and jumping on the analysis of the Turin. Yikes.
The devil doesn't like Jesus Christ for some reason.
I can relate to your story. 2 years ago, I took a solo trip to Taos, New Mexico. I stayed on a small farm that was once part of the D.H. Lawrence Ranch in San Cristobal. It is an amazing place due to its history of artists and writers who lived there during the 1920-30s. D.H. Lawrence, Aldous Huxley, Dorothy Brett, and others lived there in small cabins. Funny story is that an outhouse on the property was built by Huxley because he could not stand the idea of going to the bathroom in the open. So I rented the Dorothy Brett cabin. One night I had this dream where the brightest light was next to my bed. It was tall and the whitest, blinding light with a golden shimmer where a head should be. It was very large and had the shape of an entity, but not a person. Here is where it gets weird. It comes to me and places its hands over my mouth to try and hurt me. I then say out loud, "I believe in Jesus Christ." It stopped trying to suffocate me, and just as my reaction woke me from the dream, I swear to God that whatever it was still there when I was lucid. Then it vanished. Okay, so first, yes, I am Roman Catholic, but no, I don't practice nor am I a Jesus freak. Far from it. Then the next night, I get a knock on my cabin door. A couple was staying in the cabin next to mine. The wife asked if she could come in, and I said sure. It was a small farm and very safe. She introduces herself and told me her husband is a minister. No big deal. I am from Texas, so was she, so preachers and ministers are a dime a dozen. We have a glass of wine, chat, no biggie. Then she asks if she can pray for me. Again, not a big deal if you grew up around devout Christians. So she hugs me and starts saying a little prayer. I have no idea what happened, but I started crying my eyes out. She explained that she came over because she sensed something wasn't right in the cabin. So she leaves. I get ready for bed, turn out the light. My dog is asleep next to me, but something wakes him up like a jump scare. The cabin is pitch black. Just as I reach for the light, I hear the voice of a child say, "Don't leave me." That experience will haunt me forever. When I was a kid in 2003, I had the Nickelodeon Time Blaster alarm clock radio, which I bought from a thrift store. It was so cool, but so annoying, and I didn't really listen to the radio much or need an alarm all the time at 10 years old, so I kept it unplugged on my dresser just as decoration. One night, as I was trying to fall asleep, it said, "Good night, Jimmy," clear as day, but in that very distinct 90s clock radio sound. It was right beside me too, super unplugged. I wasn't sick or overtired or anything. I've never experienced hearing voices or anything since. Being so young, I tried to pass it off as some cute Jimmy Neutron feature and like some kind of battery malfunction, but they made those clocks in like 1996. It made a lot of annoying sounds, but not like that. And my name isn't Jimmy.
I lived briefly in a rental home, which was owned by a church in a small Florida town, and which was built in 1908. Every night around 8 o'clock, I heard dragging, shuffling footsteps coming from the kitchen. If I walked into the kitchen, they would stop, and if I turned my head to look into the kitchen from the den, they would pause and continue the very moment I looked away again. This lasted for 5 minutes or so, each and every night.
I would be walking my dog every night at 8 p.m. Let the ghosts do their thing in peace.